record this, and
Yeah, record it.
I mean, I always do, but usually Facebook does that automatically.
And if you want to let the people in anyway, they can.
No, no, we're letting people in now. We're going to start now.
Yeah.
So I'll do the intro, and you'll know when it's time for you to talk. Um, but I'll begin with the apology. Greetings, everyone. We had some technical issues. We were here, but for whatever reason, Zoom has once again changed its protocol. Usually we begin with Zoom and we go to Facebook Live. And so if any of you are also producing or presenting Zoom things via onto Facebook Live, that protocol has changed, and I will figure it out by the time we have our next person. But I want to welcome you. Thank you for your patience. Welcome to the 16th reading. That makes me so happy. In the Speculative Sundays poetry reading series, where until now, every other week, you could hear the poetry of possibilities. I'm Akua Leslie Hope, speaking to you from the ancestral land of the Onondaga, also known as the Seneca, keepers of the Western Door in the Southern Finger Lakes region of New York State. I pay homage to the Seneca, past, present, and future, and to my own ancestors by whose grace I exist and am sustained. This event is funded in part by poets and writers with public funds from the New York State Council on the Arts, with the support of Governor Andrew Cuomo and the New York State Legislature. Let me say a few words about speculative poetry. I've spent the weekend talking about it, and I was reminded that our first literature as human beings was in verse. The Ramayana, the Mahabharata, Gilgamesh, Iliad, and Odyssey, Beowulf. That poetry was speculative. Speculative poetry includes alternate history, cryptids, monsters, cyberpunk, dystopia, fairy tales, fabulism, fantasy, folklore, futurism, horror, magic, mythology, occult, paranormal, robots, science fiction, shifters, slipstream, solar punk, space opera, superhero, supernatural, sword and sorcery, sword and soul, steampunk, steampunk, time travel, post-apocalyptic, and weird. It takes all poetic forms, plus one called sci-fi coup. And I learned that 50 years ago, there was a sci-fi coup manifesto, if you want to look that up. Today's poet is Holly Lynn Walrath. Her poetry and short fiction has appeared in Strange Horizons, Fireside Fiction, Daily Science Fiction, Liminality, and Analog. Oh, that was one of my first mags. She's the author of the chapbooks Glimmerglass Girl. As I lean around and say, where'd you put it? I just had it and I don't know where I put it. Okay, I'll show you it later. Glimmerglass Girl from Finishing Line Press. Numinos Lapidi, I hope I'm saying that correctly. She'll tell me if I'm not. And a full-length poetry book, The Smallest of Bones. This year, 2021, I need to get that. She holds a BA in English from the University of Texas. Guess what? Here it is. I just didn't look at it. We still can't see it.
It's in the universe.
There it is. Well, the beautiful butterfly on the cover. Okay. She holds a BA in English from the University of Texas and a master's in creative writing from the University of Denver. Holly Lynn is a freelance editor and host of the Weird Circular, an e-newsletter for writers containing submission calls and writing prompts. Thank you for being here, Holly. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. So good to be here. So I thought that I would read some from my new book, which is coming out um, from Clash Books in September. And we're hoping very soon that it will be up for pre order on the Clash Books website. And it's very exciting because I got like the proofs and everything, and we have the book cover, and but I can't share it just yet. So that's always like but it's sort of a weird little full length, it's my first full length book, but they're all tiny poems. So each poem is maybe like max 5 lines on the page. And the structure of the book, when I was coming up with kind of like, I had all these tiny weird poems and I knew they all fit together, but I wasn't sure how to put them all together. So I decided to make each section of the book be titled after a bone in the body, which is how we get the title, The Smallest of Bones. And they're small poems. So I thought that was kind of cute. And so each section of the book is titled after a bone. And the first section is called Cranium. So I'm going to read that entire section, and it's not super long. Cranium. The cranium or skull supports bony structures of the face, creating a cavity for the brain and shielding it from injury. The bones of the skull are linked together by sutures, small joints formed by bony ossification. At birth, the skull is made of 44 separate bones, which fuse together as the body develops. Anthropologists used to argue that the brain of the female sex was similar to that of an animal. Women were emotional, less rational than men. Women's brains were analogous to infants, inferior. The male of the species has skulls that are, by contrast, heavier. The bone is thicker. By analyzing the key features of the skull of a dead person, a conclusion can be drawn regarding sex, but not gender. The skull and its bones may form our facial expressions, but they cannot form who we are. If you strip me down to my bones, am I yours? There are few places left that man has not touched. We square cities, parks, but long for wildness. Let us not assign too much power to the virgins. Buildings have ghosts, but so do trees. Where the demon's tongue is rough like a cat's, how I strain against it. I told the demon I loved you. She stood over the water and whispered a word, brought down the mountain. What is a demon anyway but a flushed girl with ocean eyes? Poured heat over my skin like bleach. There were graces I wanted to say over your body, but there was nothing left for me to pray. You say, the smallest of bones is a part of the hammer in your ear. Love is a heartbreak you can hear. God doesn't interest me, only other worlds than this. If I am trapped in hell, I will miss you most. We are the tree burning backwards. There is nothing left of us but black ash. Sea fog haunts me, like memory stealing over the bay. What is the price of water? I sink myself in the river at dawn. Your words are the stones in my pockets. Sunlight is a eulogy for the way we once were, all tangled up together at night. I was the moon peeking through your window, watching you sleep, memorizing your striped body. I wanted to eat your dreams. When I die, you say, donate my body to science so kids can pull on my nerves. Take up my ashes like paste, warmed by your skin. Rub me across your hands. The clouds are wild in the sky. I want to hold you between my teeth. What would you say to some foreplay, loud and vibrating like the cicadas slick around your golden boy hips? At the top of the mountain, we collapse, lungs grasping, into the graves of moths. Ask me, where is your wild woman? I shot her in the face. She's wandering the valley of my ribs, skull turned inside out. We made love in the snow, layers of puffy material between us, looking up at the dark mirror of the sky. The thing I missed most about our world is the stars. So that's one section of the book. and and there's several other sections with the bone names for the bone sections. And the other thing I want to read a little bit from is Numinos Lapidi, which is a chapbook that came out from Kipple Press, and it was entirely in Italian, which was a really neat experience because I got to work with this translator who took my poems that were in English, and he translated them into Italian for Italian readers. And Kipple Press does all these like little Italian chapbooks of speculative poetry. And so it was really neat getting to work with the translator of that book. And just like, I guess you don't think about like, how is my poetry going to translate to another language? Like, I had never thought that would happen. Um, and Earlier this year, the translator actually passed away. His name was Marco Raimondo. Yeah, and he had a disability, and he was really vocal about um, just his disability and his life during the pandemic and everything. And so it was really nice to have known him, and I'm really glad that a couple of the poems in that book are being published. One of them appeared in the Mythala review earlier this year. So yeah, I wanted to read a little bit from that because, I really want to honor, the work that he did for it. And sadly, I will not read it in Italian because I'm very bad at Italian. But if you want to go look it up online, you can buy the book and read it in Italian. So, and one last thing about these poems is that they're in a pantome form, although I don't do a lot of rhymes, so it's not necessarily like a rhyming pantome form. Um, so here's the first one. Dark shapes move in the morning before dawn. They are like us, but they are not human. How do we know this? How can we tell? It is by their beating hearts, worn on the outside. We would never reveal so much in one go. How do we know this? How can we tell? An agreement we signed with our creamy blood. We would never reveal so much in one go. The magic of stones covered in a thin layer of skin. An agreement we signed with our creamy blood. They are gentle when they speak to us. The magic of stones covered in a thin layer of skin. We want to touch these waxy hearts, to know. They are gentle when they speak to us. It is by their beating hearts worn on the outside. We want to touch these waxy hearts to know. They are like us, but they are not human. Thank you. And here's another one, A Graveyard for Fairy Tales. A child hangs upside down from the barrel of a cannon. In here, the air is bright and stale, or else poisonous. A princess crawls among the flowers and grenades. Everything here is twisting or untwisting into itself. In here, the air is bright and stale, or else poisonous. A wolf is singing songs made of barbed jewels. Everything here is twisting or untwisting into itself. In the deep of the well, death unbraids his hair. A wolf is singing songs made of barbed jewels. The dark forest is disillusioned and laid bare. In the deep of the well, death unbraids his hair. But this is the ruthless dream of a frightened child. The dark forest is disillusioned and laid bare. A princess crawls among the flowers and grenades. But this is the ruthless dream of a frightened child. Who hangs upside down from the barrel of a cannon? I'll read one more from that little chapbook. The mountain is so close to disappearing from our horizon. When you cut it open, you see the history of the world, bits of rock and mud and fossil and white bone. You have to break a geode to see its insides. Someone has to decide the weight of land. Bits of rock and mud and fossil and white bone. An old woman swallows hot decay and cries. Someone has to decide the weight of land. Limping, you know there is courage in brokenness. An old woman swallows hot decay and cries. You walk under a grove of silver trees and scream. Limping, you know there is courage in brokenness. Someone calls to you on the cliffsides again and again. You walk under a grove of silver trees and scream. You have to break a geode to see its insides. Something calls you to the cliffside again and again. When you cut it open, you see the history of the world. So that's a little excerpt from that. And then I kind of just wanted to read a couple of poems that I had published last year. I haven't done too much submitting this year because it has been such a wild year so far. And I'm sure everyone probably feels the same. But yeah, I mean, I haven't just not had a chance to submit a lot of my poems out, and I really hope to be able to get to do that. Um, and so I will read a couple of poems and that I had last year. This first one is inspired by the book by Shirley Jackson, which is oh, it's just gone straight out of my head. I'm sorry. Let me Google real quick. This is the beauty of being on Zoom, is that I can Google. We have always lived in the castle. That one. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to read that. Now the patient recounts the houses in her mind. I am checking my safeguards. In the summer, when there should be jam and cakes on the lawn in the sun, but they are all wrong. The silver dollars I dig up are all bones rattling in the box. The book nailed to the pine is a cat's tail, and it makes me scream, like this. I'm afraid to dig up the doll. Will it be her head? I'm afraid to dig up the mouse. Will it be alive? When I rush down the dark path, the fence is all knocked down, and whatever walks in the house walks alone. So that one appeared in the Eye to the Telescope House and Home issue. So I thought that was fitting for that issue. So that's that one. And then this one was in Starline, and it's called Dear Future. Dear Future, it's important that you read this slowly. You'll need words where you are, strong ones that defy argument. You'll be tired of arguing. We were. After the hills crumbled and oceans dried up, we crawled down to the depths we had never plumbed, the deepest secret places of the earth. And we learned there are no secrets after all. The moon came close to us. When it fell, it was merely a thin slice of white, as we had suspected all along. It got stuck on a skyscraper for just a moment before flattening the city. You arrived before we could get 8 hours of sleep a night or finish our to-do lists. We craved you like Vicodin. Your budding pink starlight apocalypses. There are so many beautiful moments we let go wrong. We were so certain. Did you know, while you waited, wherever you came from, how silent we could be as we lay down before you? Did you know yourself even then? At least we have this to leave you. Look, we don't have any good advice, just to say that we're sorry. It's important to apologize to the people you've harmed. Say yes a lot, but say no when you need to. Eat organic. Give more than you take. We realize these are platitudes, but there's always a little kernel of truth in the words of the past, isn't there? We hope you found an answer to the questions we never knew to ask. These were crimes committed for you, in your name. Don't keep our monuments. We don't want them anymore. Love, your past. And then let's see what else I have in my magic packet. I printed a bunch of these out and I forget what order they're in. Um, okay, so this one was in Twisted Moon Mag. And this one and the one before are kind of like prose poems. So they have kind of like longer paragraph stanzas. I always like to say that because when you're doing a reading, it's hard to tell what the structure looks on the page. And sometimes I think I'm more of a page poet than a reading poet. I don't know. We hold up eternity. You make me into all of your favorite things. Wax winged, you model my body to your likeness. Everything must be similar, the remains. You step upon my altar, run a finger along my lips, lick the dust from your skin. It tastes like skin cells and sweat and stardust. You carve a placard on my stomach which says, straight and narrow. Not meeting, our eyes seek out other things to focus on. The stars, the demons in the pit. Hungry deers, you whisper. You bend my ears forward, staple them down. I hear nothing but your breathing. One day I will no longer be stone, but flesh and blood and talon. I will hide among the living. I will break you. For now, your accusations hold. Your talons disgust me. When they once sent a shiver down my spine, inching up my thigh, creeping close to you at night, I whisper star-soaked words to your knee, your hips. You turn in your sleep. You don't belong here, little fake, you murmur, sliding a hand under your pillow to find the cool place, the dark hole kept in your pocket pillow, the one you stole from my mouth. You grind your teeth. I climb back to the wall by morning, climb the stairs. There with my sisters, we hold up eternity. This one was first appeared in Liminality. Divergent and rotten to the core. I am cutting out pieces of me in spirals. She whispered in my ear, Apple girl, can we just not? I need a spell for how to believe in my own sex. Sometimes I think we're just drunk on impulse whimsy. She's sleeping on Esplanade with the muse. This place is a smoke railway. Her voice is an arrow pulled from the quiver, broken. I need to work on vengeance. If I squeeze my eyes real tight, I can see its elfin shame. So tiny. I walk down Frenchman Street and take off my plain girl clothes. I am the least barren thing here. And I let myself lie under the tree, knotting up my baggage, shoving it under my skin. She is panoramic. Abandoned house empty. At night we will drink, null, numb, drunk with love. And then this is another tiny poem, and I feel like I don't write a lot of science poems because I'm not a sciencey person. I was like an English major, and books are my favorite thing. But I'm kind of like weirdly into this like very hard to explain, ambiguous science that's out there, and so I think those are kind of the science type topics that I gravitate to, is the things that we don't really fully understand about science. Um, so this one is called Yes, Antimatter is Real. In theory, a particle and its antiparticle have the same mass. This is not like the thinness of your shadow, nor is it like love. If they touch, mutual annihilation. We can only observe so much, the unsolved equations living in each other's eyes, this radioactive decay. That's my science poem. I don't know. Maybe I should write more. And then this one, so that one appeared in Analog, the one I just read. This one also appeared in Analog. And it's inspired by a line from an Edward Hirsch poem. So many blank moons, after Edward Hirsch. We redrew this galaxy one planet at a time. With charcoal, we smudged out the stars and left only the space between. With oils, we swept suns onto palette knives until light was a memory. With our fingertips, we erased satellites and moons and auras until the canvas was blank. Dreaming is easier when you can start from scratch. So that one was an analog. um, and this one was in Pork Belly Press. They make these like really cute, like nice little cute zines that are like based on different themes. And then this one was body positivity, so love me, love my belly zine. And of course, I took it to a dark speculative place like I do. It's never going to stop. After redacted. Look, this is the life I'm living down here with the snails underground, where no one can hear you except the bones of dinosaurs. We don't need our eyes. That doesn't mean you get to keep them for your collection. There's an army of men gave up their hearts to be cogs in the earth machine, fingers slotted into wires, snaking through the hot core. But I want to go deeper, to come out on the other side with my innards still intact. You told me, one more drink. If you die, let it be beside me. I ate up all your dirt, carried it inside me, licked it off your cocaine fingers, tucked it under the flaps of my muddy body. And this one appeared in Liminality last year, and it's in my long poems, so it's a little bit longer, and it's called Daughters Saving Mothers. I keep her in the hope chest, and when I come home, she presses her lips to the keyhole and asks, "Are you holy? Are you harmless?" Her body is a ring, her mouth clamped around her ankles, acid teeth slowly devouring skin and bone from sinew, and I promised I would save her, so I go out into the ashfall and inquire of gold sellers, snake charmers, dumpling carts. Do you know a way to save my mother? I'm asking all the wrong questions. Am I like her? The men wipe their hands on towels and listen with kind blue eyes. shaking their head sadly, and I shrug farther into my coat, where the red ash forms a line on my skin. Will I be like her? I don't feel any urge to suck my toes. My teeth are ground flat. I chew on my lips until they bleed. In alleyways, I give men a quick kiss for the next piece to the puzzle. I knew a woman with the disease once, they say, before they hold me. I come home empty handed. I pull her, slippery and heavy, onto my lap. I want to lock her away like a secret and throw away the key. But I can't. I won't. I love her like I love myself. In the shower, red swirls of ash. Our world isn't long for itself. I curl up in the porcelain tub and sleep under the water. Wasteful, wasteful, she would chide. There comes a day when I crave flesh. No, need it, want it, don't care how. Am I her or is she me? I don't let her see the man I bring home. I twitch the blanket over the hope chest, kick it into the closet, and make the choice she wasn't able to make, for she was braver than I, and I keep looking for ways to save her, even when her mouth is at her waist, and so little of her remains. Soon I will be the only reminder of the devourer we've become. Thank you. That was my last poem. I could always pull up
I
more
am
if we need
so
more.
glad you read that poem. I was going to request that poem, and you're being very modest, audience. Her poem was nominated for a Riesling Award.
Yes.
I love that poem, Mother, Daughter Saving Mother.
Thank you.
That kicks butt and takes numbers. I, it's, yeah, I love that. I was, I have, I was surprised I have two other favorites that you didn't read. I'm not going to make you read them.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Which ones are they?
and that was, I'm going to find a unicorn.
Yes.
And the one that's right next to it, they're both so lovely. I swallowed the moon.
Yes.
And, right? So I see themes that are emerging in your work, but I will be a good host this time and begin with an audience question that you have before I go through my list of questions for you. So,
Sure.
and this is a really lovely question. Horror sometimes feels a little out of place when it's lumped with sci-fi fantasy, and I know a lot of writers say it's because even supernatural horror is more about a mood than content. Your bone poems feel very horror to me. Do you see them that way? And what are some of your techniques for evoking that horror mood?
That's such a good question.
Isn't it?
Yes. Oh man. I do think the bone poems are more horror. I've been getting a little bit more into writing horror lately, and I was like, wait a second, have I been writing horror all along?
A little bit.
Yeah. And I think so. To me, maybe I'm not a good person to answer this because I was like, oh, a lot of my things are kind of like horror in theme. Yeah, so I do agree that they have kind of this like horror, I don't know, like spookiness to them. And a lot of the kind of tropes that appear in them are horror tropes. So, like demons and ghosts and body horror. That's one of my favorite subgenres of horror. And then I don't know that I have specific techniques for evoking a mood. They say that, horror is about emotion. You're trying to make the person who's reading feel fear. Um, And so I think that a lot of my poems are about emotion, and I try to bring some kind of feeling of emotion. And when I'm writing a narrative poem where I'm telling a story, there's always some really intense emotion or relationship going on. Because that, to me, that's the biggest horror, is relationships with other people. And people, like, people are scary.
Yes, they are.
So yeah, I try to bring that out. I don't have any specific techniques, but I would say focus on emotion. Yeah.
Speaking of technique, I'm flabbergasted that you have a book of one of my own favorite forms to use, which is the Pantun. And
Yeah.
oh my gosh, those exquisite lines. Death unbraids its hair, the ruthless dream of a frightened child. You have to break a geo to see its insides. Someone has to decide the weight of land. Uh, it's such a, to me, a fabulous form for lifting those glorious lines and making us focus on them and like music doing a riff on them. Tell me why you chose Pantoums. And but first tell us, can we read Numenos Lapidi in English?
So it's not available in English yet.
That's heartbreaking.
I know. I'm trying to find, I'm going through the work of like submitting it out first, and it's a long process.
Those
Like,
are such glorious. You can't do this to us. That so
yeah.
okay, folks. We only got to hear them here. Those are some so many. Each one was delicious and delightful, I must say. So anyway, but tell us about this process because we need to read them.
Yeah, I mean, I that form, I started writing it in the Codex forum. So I don't know if any of y'all are familiar with this group, but Codex is a group for new writers, and you only have to have like one pro sale to be able to join the group, and it's an online forum. And on that forum, we have a speculative poetry contest where we write speculative poems, in, like, I think we do like one a week for 4 weeks or something like that, and then we like share it with each other, and it's anonymous, and so it's kind of a fun thing that we do. And that was one of the prompts that Deborah David came up with, and she runs that kind of codex
Oh, well, we
contest.
know her from the Science Fiction and Fantasy Poetry Association as
Yeah.
our prompt person.
Yeah, she's
So
really good at prompts. So that was one of the prompts, was do this form, and I just got obsessed with that
I
form. I
love
was
that
like,
form too. I do. But
yes,
tell us why do you love that form?
I love it because it's not hard to write. Like, some poem forms are really rigid, even down to like the syllables and the rhythm and the meter, and I'm not good at that. And in the
Like
Pantsu,
sonnets and villanelles.
right, I'm like, I can't do that. My brain just does not operate that way. And this form is sort of, you can do it in that way, but it's easy to sort of veer off of the path, and instead, like, some of the ones I did rhyme, but some of them don't, and it doesn't have to rhyme for it to really to work, I think.
Mhm.
And the repetition of like how you repeat certain lines based on the form, is super interesting, because the line gets moved down, and now it's sandwiched between these other two lines,
Yes.
that have different meanings. So all of a sudden, that line that you're repeating has an entirely new meaning. And I just was obsessed with
Yes.
that. Yeah. So,
That's what attracts you to the form.
yeah, I love that. I think it's always interesting to me when a form makes makes sense for a poem, and really evokes that mood that you're looking for, like sonnets. I always think of sonnets as love poems. I will not, I mean, you can write a sonnet about something else, but I'm like, it has to be a love poem. So,
That's your indoctrination,
yes. I mean Shakespeare, that's how I
right?
look at it. So, yeah.
Yep. Oh my gosh. Um, so we have to wait to read the fabulous pantoons in English, and you're working on making that happen. Um, when did you start writing poetry?
I started writing when I was a high schooler, and I was very angsty and emo punk kid and I needed an emotional outlet. And so poems were had always been like a way for me to sort of like process the things that I'm dealing with in my life and put them into metaphor or um, veiled or in a different, point of view. So that's when I started, and I didn't really start writing speculative poetry until,
That was the next question. Thank you.
yeah, I until like probably 5 6 years ago, when I just
Wow.
started getting involved in like this sci-fi fantasy community, and I was writing a lot of like short fiction first and flash fiction, and then I was like, I need to write more poems that are speculative because that's where it's at.
I
you know
agree. I agree.
that is where it's at. So, um yeah, now that's like I will not do any, that's my favorite thing. So, yeah.
Hmm. What's your favorite type of speculative poetry? Now, you did talk about horror, but do you have a set of favorites or a favorite?
I don't have a specific favorite type. I really love all types of poems. I love all structures. Um, each year, I try to read as much as I can of the poems that were published in the previous year. So, because I'm a member of the sci-fi, the SFPA, I try to read all the poems from all the major poetry publications in the last year so that I can like nominate poems, because I see that as a way to, support the community and support new writers. I always try to nominate like newer people who maybe are not, necessarily involved but could be involved in the community. And so I read a lot. Like I will sit there through Strange Horizons, for example, and like read every poem that came out last
Bravo!
year
Reading
because
is
I
so
and I love
critical.
a lot of them. Like, there are a lot of really good speculative poems out there. So I don't have like a specific favorite, although um, you know, I always love finding writing by women and writers of color and LGBTQ writers. I'm always looking for more poems to read by, marginalized voices, because they're they're amazing and we need more of them. And that's
Well,
that's
I
kind of,
certainly think so.
yeah, that's my favorite thing is like, I run Interstellar Flight Press, which is a new press that publishes poetry books. And one of our volunteers was like, I wrote a speculative poem and it's getting published. And I was like, I need to read it right now. And he sent it to me and I read it and I was like, this is amazing. And that really excites me, is like just finding people who like this is their new, they've only written maybe a couple speculative poems, and I love finding them. And sometimes I'll email them and be like, write more poems.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes. Um, how do you decide what you want to write about? You did mention that you use very much the stuff of your life um, as lived. Um, what makes you choose and what else?
Um, it's weird. Like I will very often what I will do is like I will sit down to write in the morning, and if I'm working on poems, which sometimes I'm not, sometimes I'm working on like a book or short story, but when I'm working on a poem, it feels different to me because very often the poem arrives in my head kind of nearly done. And so I will just sit down and kind of write whatever thing comes to me. And it is very often personal. Like it's very often based on like something that I'm dealing with or a memory that I have or like if I'm writing a series, I try to work off of, what I already have in that. And sometimes I don't fully understand where these words come from. There's just like a channel that like opens up and all of a sudden I have thoughts about, some weird thing and it pops into my head.
Fabulous.
Yeah. I do read because I read a lot of poetry. I think that also inspires me is like, I'll be reading a new book that I really like and there's a really good line and I'm like, "Oh, I'm going to write something inspired by that."
Um, you work as an editor. So, at what point in your process do you edit your work?
So I have a really weird editing process for my poems, which is
Glad
that
I asked. Let's hear it.
yeah, so I write a lot of poems throughout the year. I haven't written as much this year and last, but like in 2018, I think I wrote like 150 poems. And
Wow.
yeah, so I write a lot of poems.
Every other day, one for every other day of that
That
year.
was that was a very big year. And so because I have so many poems, I feel like I would get confused if I sat down and like tried to like revise them individually. So
Hmm.
I wait until the end of the year and then I print them all out and revise them all in one go. So I'm revising
Oh my
like
gosh.
the previous years all at once.
All at once.
Yeah.
I understand the resting and the leaving. I think that's fabulous part of the process, but then you burden
Yeah.
yourself with doing them all at it. Is
Yeah.
it a desire to get that over with, or what? Why do you do it that way?
I mean, I think I need to get them done because then I'm like, I'm not going to mess with them anymore. So, like, after I've gone through that whole, so I print them out, I print them out and I go through them and read them out loud and very often like
Yes.
cut things and, do all the normal poetry kind of revision process. But I like to get them all done because then I have like this huge packet of poems that I can send out and submit. But that was like, that was a very prolific year for me. Like last year, I think I maybe wrote like 30 poems or something, so it's not as many. And I haven't
That's
gotten to those yet.
that's still multiples for 12 months. So that's almost
Yeah.
a month.
Yeah. Um, and
You're
so, yeah,
very
I like that.
you're very prolific. I mean, will you give us a couple more insights to your writing routine?
Yeah, I mean, and it's different. It seems like it's different in the pandemic. That has been a struggle because I used to go very early in the morning to a coffee shop in Houston and I would sit in the it was like, 7 in the morning. I'm at this like coffee shop in Houston and I would put my headphones in and listen to like an ambient music that um or like classical music that doesn't have words because I think the words would distract me. And then I would just sort of like write a poem, um, you know, that whatever comes to me, or if I was working on a project. you know. I do NaPoWriMo a lot. I didn't do it this year. I wanted to do it this year, but I got behind.
Me too.
And
I
yeah,
didn't either.
I
So,
didn't yeah, I didn't get to it. This year I wanted to work on a series of blackout poems
mm,
where I do all serial killers.
wow.
So I might do it in May instead. We'll see. Uh,
That sounds amazing. What will be the text that you're amending?
so I'm going to erase the either like court documents
Ah,
or journals if they kept journals, or like some of these dudes kept like manifestos,
right.
that type of original text, and do the blackout erasure on it.
What attracts you to that kind of project? That's kind of dark for
Yeah.
what seems a very sunny sort of life.
Yeah, I love true crime. I love it. I listen to a lot of like true crime podcasts and shows, and like anything that's like true crime murders. Like for many, many years I watched SVU.
Me
Um,
too.
and I kept thinking about um how we sort of treat here these serial killers and killers in general in our society, and that there's this whole subculture built up around them,
Yes,
and there isn't a lot of voice for the victims of
yes.
these killers. And I thought that it would be fitting to erase the serial killers words.
That sounds so connected to your Bones project also. Is that sort of thinking what underlies your Bones series?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're sort of connected in that, um, I don't know, I just have a fascination with like weird, dark death things, I guess.
That's not
And
so much what I was feeling, or even, I mean, not to cut you off, but that's not
sure.
so much what I was pointing at. It seems to me that you examine the infrastructure of things, of feelings, of domesticity, of interaction. Um, it's the viscera, but it's the innards of it, and that you're even at this place called Bones. It feels like such a natural progression from your other work. So that's what I was pointing at. Now I could be totally wrong. I mean, you're the poet, so tell me.
Yeah, like the bone poems, like the cranium poem,
Yes.
that are the beginning of each section, were kind of, I was reading a lot about this idea of neurosexism. So neurosexism is the idea that researchers apply sexism to differences in
Structure.
sex characteristics, in biology. And there's a lot of research that's like, what's the difference between a woman's brain and a man's brain? um, and so I don't know, I haven't fully realized, I
Our
think, in my
brains
head,
are
but
bigger. That's the difference.
you know
My
um
big head, yes.
because
There's
there are
more in there.
but yeah, and that is sort of an interesting concept to me, this idea that like even how we understand science is influenced by things like gender and um our cultural upbringing and all of that. So I'm always picking apart things that I'm like, what's that about?
Well, I want to thank you ever so much. Our hour is up. Oh, Holly, it's been a delight. There is so
Thank
much of your
you.
work that I love, admire, and adore. I thank everyone for being here with us. Thank you, Holly, for reading. And I just want to say we're going to go on a brief hiatus and we'll return June 20th with Juan Manuel Perez. So please know that May, we haven't stopped. We're just pausing and we'll be back in June. Thank you all for being here. Peace and blessings and good evening and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.